The Utah Jazz have a defensive crisis. We're talking about it next on Locked on Jazz. You
are Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How are you? I am David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan. Today, we look at the Jazz, who are in the midst of an 8-game defensive crisis. And there's some underlying to it, and we'll get into it. They are no longer forcing turnovers. They're allowing massive transition points, and they are 2-6 in that 8-game stretch. They're also not per se making winning plays, but honestly, I'm going to tell you what, I think it all goes back to the defense and what's going on there. There are certainly, we probably could have dodged this a little bit, but I'll tell you why. The defense, it all stems back to the defense, and you're just playing so far against the odds. Lauri Markkanen gets snubbed, or does Domatas Sabonis get snubbed? And Lauri Markkanen also gets snubbed. We'll talk about that, and then we'll continue our trade deadline teams as we continue here today. As I mentioned, I'm David Locke, and I'm the radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider, and this is Locked on Jazz. It's a daily podcast on the Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, and geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thank you for making Locked on Jazz your first listen, and thank you very much to all the everydayers that are out there. We are free. We're available on all podcasting apps. Thumbs up, please. If you're watching on YouTube, follow and subscribe. If you're listening on a pod, thank you very much. Any 5-star reviews are greatly appreciated. All right. So Will already has some really good points after the game, and that's where I was going to start the show today. And his point is like, we're just mentally making mistakes. And that's what Ron and I largely talked about in postcast. But as I prepped and dug in, I discovered a few things that really were frightening to me. So we have allowed a defensive rating of 129 or more in 6 of our last 9 games. Now, let me try to put some of this, in 6 of our last 8 games. Let me try to put some of this in perspective, because 1, perspective actually makes the show go. And 2, I think it really matters. So 1 is the offensive rating in the NBA for all the talk of the offensive explosion. And by the way, I thought last night's game was called differently, and everybody scored. The offensive rating in the NBA is way up, and there's a bunch of teams over 120, and the league average is 116 right now. And the best in the league is a 122. And the Jazz, over the last recent stretch, have allowed a 129.6, a 131, a 141, a 121 in Charlotte, a 105 in Washington, a 146 against New Orleans, a 117.6 against Houston, and a 128 against Oklahoma City, depending on which way you look at it. If you lose cleaning the glass, the numbers are actually a little higher because they take out blowout time. Let me try to put, so 5 of our last 8, depending on how you look at the Houston game, or 6 of our last 8 have really been poor. In fact, 5 of our last 8 have been in the 17th percentile or lower defensively. Last night was in the 13th. New York was in the 14th. Brooklyn was in the 3rd. You could go, if you want to, that we got on the road and got tired. Okay, there are some other signs in here that are a little disturbing that we're going to dig into. Trying to put this in perspective, when the Jazz have a defensive rating of 125 or more, we're 1-14 this season. Okay, that's our threshold. Clearly, where if we have a defensive rating of 125 or more, we're 1-14. When you allow a defensive rating of 130, we talked about this last week, actually, interestingly enough, it's over. Teams are 16-133 when you allow a defensive rating of over 130. So I could sit here and talk about The fact that I didn't love a Jordan Clarkson pull-up three. I didn't love a Keontae George getting caught from behind. I didn't love a John Collins this the other day. I didn't love a Simone Fontecchio that the other day. I didn't love it. But we're allowing 130 points per 100 possessions. That's we're 1-14 when we allow 125. We've done that against Philly, New York, Brooklyn, New Orleans, and Oklahoma City in 5 of our last 8 games. And the one in the middle was a 118 against Houston. And the only ones that weren't kind of dreadful were Washington and Charlotte, who aren't very good. We had done that once in the last month. We've done it 5 times in the last 8 games. So that's why I'm going to call this a defensive crisis. There are 2 aspects of the defensive crisis that I think are taking place. One is we have just stopped forcing turnovers. We actually did this last year too. We have literally stopped forcing turnovers. So the lowest turnover rate in the NBA is the Milwaukee Bucks at 11%. Our defensive turnover percentage in the last 7 games are the following. The lowest in the NBA is 11%. Okay? 5, 6.7, 7.4, 10, 11, 8.5, and 6.5. Against Oklahoma City, we're at 15.4. Those 5 turnover rates are 5 of the lowest we've had all season long. In fact, they are 5 of the 6 lowest turnover rates we've had all season long. The only other one is the 50-point loss to Dallas. They're 6 of the 8 lowest we've had all season long. So this is very different than what we've been doing all year long. To put it in league perspective, which I tried to do, here's what our turnover rate, what percentile we've been in turnover percentage the last games. First, that's not good. You want to be 99th. Third, 5th, 16th, 5th, 8th, and 3rd. So we've just stopped forcing turnovers. We have also just stopped getting back on defense. I have a harder time trying to figure out how to show this to you and I had a hard time trying to figure out how to share this with a league perspective on this. It's not as crystal clear as some others, but let me try. The league average in opponents' fast break points per game is 14. A lot of geeky numbers today, but hopefully this is all making sense. The league average opponents' fast break points allowed is 14. We're last in the NBA at 18. And oh, dear God, could we please be only at 18? Here are the numbers for the last 4 games on what we've allowed in opponents' fast break points. Remember, the 2 numbers I've given you, league average is 14. We're worst in the NBA at 18. Last night, we allowed 27 fast break points. The night before, 24. The night before, 28. Charlotte, 28. Washington, 27. New Orleans, 35. Houston, 19. Oklahoma City, 29. Like what I would do for the league worst average of 18 again. And by the way, just deduce this logically, our average clearly was better than 18 before this stretch. Trying to, again, not trying to belabor, but trying to make sure this makes sense. The league average since January 18th in fast break points allowed is 14.5. We're allowing 27.1. And the next closest in the NBA is 19.8. That's a crisis. So we have a defensive crisis right now. It all works together. And so to some extent, it could be that the offense is not taking as good of shots, doing as good of things. However, like last night, we only had 6 live ball turnovers. And they got 27 fast break points. The signature on this team was that they played hard and did all these things, and I think it still is. But there is clearly some level of just teams just running on us. It's a bummer. Last night was a bummer. We had 6 live balls against Philly, 9 against the Knicks, led to 24 points, 12 against Brooklyn, led to 28. So they're getting a lot of fast break points. I don't love the way fast break points are counted in the NBA. It's really just quick baskets. But they're just getting a lot of really quick baskets on us. Not off live ball turnovers. Charlotte had 28 off 7. New Orleans had 35 fast break points off 5 live ball turnovers. Houston, we were great. We had 11 live ball turnovers, which is a lot. Only allowed 19 fast break points. So since the 18th of January, which is this, obviously I'm picking a bad stretch of basketball for us. We're 2-6. We're 2-8. 2-6 out of 8. We're allowing 27 fast break points, with the league average being at 14, almost 2 times. We'll discuss it a little bit more. There's not an individual to go find here. This is got to play defense again, or else. I mean, you're just not giving yourself a chance to win basketball games. I'd love to analyze a million other things, but my point here is when you're allowing 125 points or more per 100 possessions, we're 1-14 this year. You're just not giving yourself a chance to win basketball games. The league average, I can probably do this really fast. If you allow 125, it's happened 305 times this year. And there have been 40, I could be a little bit off, 44 wins. Out of the 305 times somebody is allowed. So if you allow a defensive rating of 125, you lose 86% of the time. We've done that in 5 of our last 8 games. That's our defensive rating recently. That, to me, is what's going on here. Could be fatigue. Could be a lot of things. Like there's probably a lot of explanations. I'm just giving you the facts. We'll talk some more about it. We're just getting started here on Locked On Jazz. Today's edition of Locked On Jazz is brought to you by Murdoch Hyundai, located at 4646 South State Street, also located in Logan and in Linden. If you're going to stop by Murdoch Hyundai, let's get you the VIP treatment that is the signature of the Murdochs and the signature of you being a Locked On everydayer. Why Murdoch? Why Hyundai? The Murdochs have been in Utah for over 80 years, giving you the no regrets experience, making sure that they're a member of your community, interacting with you, and being there for you. And Hyundai, great lineup of cars, starting with the Kona, the Zippy SUV, all the way up to the big Palisade with the Santa Fe in the middle. Bought 2 of them. The Ioniq and the 5 and 6 or the electric cars have taken the world by storm. You're seeing more and more of those out on the market right now. You can get all of those at Hyundai. The price point, the bells, the whistles, nothing else matches it. So stop by Murdoch Hyundai at 4646 South State Street, also in Logan and in Linden. But please email me first so that we can take care of you and give you that VIP experience at Murdoch Hyundai. My email is dlock09@gmail.com. Today's show is also brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel.com/lockedon is your chance to get into the action and get ready for Super Bowl Sunday this weekend. That's right. Super fun coming up this next weekend after this is Super Bowl Sunday. So right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. And new customers get $200 in bonus bets if their first bet of $5 or more wins. Which player will score a touchdown and how many points we scored. It's all part of the Super Bowl Sunday fun. So go win your bet this weekend. Get your $200 of bonus bets and then load it up on Super Bowl Sunday with FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com/locked on to get your bonus bets. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. Appreciate you. Appreciate you taking the time to join us. So from just to wrap this a little bit, the lack of forcing turnovers makes it almost impossible to really be that good a defensive team. We're last in the league. So since January 28th, our defensive rating is 127.3. The Mavericks are right there with us. Okay, so I just said, like, if you have a defensive rating of over 125, you lose 86% of your games. Our defensive rating is a 127 in this stretch. Mavericks only played 6 games. Staying with this for a second, and we look at our 4 factors, the lack of turnovers that we're forcing in that time period is league average again is 13.5, and we're forcing 9% of all possessions as turnovers. It gets super hard if you're last in the league in forcing turnovers to actually be pretty good defensively, and then it's even harder if you're allowing the fast break points we're allowing. Okay. Chris Dunn has the best defensive rating on the roster in that time period. It's a 120. It's not great. Simone has the next best at 122. Then Lauri, then Collin, and then John Collins. So our starting lineup has actually been fine. Like, the easy answer on this one, and where I probably would have gone, like, John Collins' defensive rating last night was like a 140. Wasn't good. Last night at the rim, I believe they missed 1 shot when John Collins was on the floor, and they missed like 5 when Walker was on the floor. Like, it makes a difference to have his size. But frankly, in the last 8 games, Walker's defensive rating is a 127. Keontae's is a 132. Ochai's is a 138. Kelly Olynyk's is a 127. Like, the bench group is having as much a problem as anyone else. And the bench group should probably be the least fatigued from travel, in theory. And the bench group is why we were so good earlier, because we were throwing out 240 minutes at you and just handling it. So Will Hardy last night, post-game, had a really good point about we're just not, and Ron Boone post-game, we're just not making winning plays. And it's costing. And it's happening right when we're getting close. Like, we're knocking on the door, we're huffing and puffing, we're having a chance, and then we just don't make the winning play. And last night, frankly, Patrick Beverley hits a 3 and we miss a few. Though our 3-point shooting late in games has been unbelievable this year. So we're 50% clutch 3-point shooting. It's crazy. But we did have just multiple times last night where we get it down to, Lauri gets it down late in the second quarter to 58-57. Lauri hits a 3. And next thing you know, it's 69-57. Like, we've worked our way back to 1 with 3:31 left in the second. And then all of a sudden, like, they score on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of 7 possessions to close the half. And next thing you know, we're going to the half down 71-61. And then impressively, we fight back. We get it to 77-76 on a Sexton jumper with 7:34 left. And then next thing you know, like, they run off 6 straight. We work our way back to 82-81. You're feeling good about it. And next thing you know, we're at 86 all on a Jordan Clarkson 3 with 3:07 left in the third. And next thing you know, it's 91-86. Like, just boom, again. And we go with offensive foul on Ojai on a pick where he didn't get a shot off. Clarkson takes a kind of ill-advised 3. Keontae misses a 3. Kelly misses a 3. Jordan misses a shot inside. Luckily, Walker dunks it home. And that kind of gets us back in it. And then our guys fight again. Like, that's the impressive thing. We're staying, like, the effort is 100% there. At least on the offensive end. Like the defensive numbers don't peak to non-effort. They just peak to non-execution and a little of that. And then we finally broke through, right? We're tied at 117. We take a 120-117 lead late. Maxey hits a 3 with 140 left that Will Hardy talked about at the press conference. Like Colin leaves him just with a ton of airspace. He's got 50. Like force him to drive. Now, on the other end, he's not a great off-the-bounce three-point shooter. He just had a hell of a day. And then Jordan Clarkson gets a wide-open 3. Good shot. Like, no complaint. Jordan, we run a play. Jordan gets a wide-open 3. He just missed it. Maxey misses. We come down. We're tied at 120. Clarkson gets into lane. He had 10 assists last night. He pivots nicely, holds his feet, throws a nice pass to Lauri to the corner. It's a little contested, but he's Lauri. He's 7 feet tall. I want him to take the shot. He misses. They swing it around. Patrick Beverley on a play where Tobias Harris drives. I think John Collins comes off the strong corner. It's okay. He's guarding Beverley in the play. He cuts off the drive. Doesn't get back out to Beverley because it's a long way to go. And Beverley buries the 3. And then that's kind of the game. Sexton gets fouled, makes 2 free throws. And then we have the whole Oubre dunk contest thing. But by the time that's done, we're inside 24 seconds, down by 1. We got to start fouling, and they make their free throws, and then they play it really, really smart down the stretch and foul. We never get a chance. We're down 3, and we just never get a chance. So a little bit like the tragedy of make or miss league kind of happens there, right? Lauri gets a good look. John Collins gets a good look, doesn't make it. It made him earlier. We've got to lie to Simone about what zip code he's in. The guy's so good on the road. He's not making shots. He's not making threes at home. He was 1 of 6 at home last night after going 47% on the road. He's like the 4th best three-point shooter in the NBA on the road. And he's not been at home. We're going to have him and Jordan thought he was on the road still. 1 of 7. Jordan's like a 40% three-point shooter at home, bad on the road. We got to get these guys can lie to each other. 10 assists by Jordan last night. His assist numbers are just incredible this year. His evolution as a player is just so impressive. So we've just got to tighten that up. But I'm going to side a little bit on I guess my point is you can go find that one play, and Ron and I did that a little bit. It's an overall the defense is just, it's not giving us a chance. Transition defense and lack of forcing turnovers is just not giving us a chance right now. All right. Did Lauri get snubbed? And we'll look at trade deadline teams as we continue here on Locked On Jazz. We're continuing to just get started. It is Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the daily fantasy sports game of fun where you pick more or less, and you do not have to worry about the Sharks or the Pros or any of those guys. You take 2 or 6 stat projections and you get them right, and then you watch your winnings roll in. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA for your first deposit match up to $100. That's LockedOnNBA for your first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks has all sorts of great features, and that's why they're the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America and a great deal of fun to play. So go make your choices. PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA for the first deposit match up to $100. And go have some fun with it this weekend on various NBA games. The rest, we're back at work on Sunday against the Bucks. Today's show is also brought to you by Intercap Lending. Our good friend Steve Carter over at Intercap does amazing work. We absolutely love him. He's the best customer service person I can possibly give you. And that's what makes us love Steve Carter. So here's Intercap Lending is an absolutely fabulous company, Utah-based, who is able to work outside of Utah. So it's not a Utah only. And Steve is been truly one of the most fun parts of kind of my part of being locked on and having sponsors. Steve's with us, been with us for a really, really long time and has been absolutely terrific with us, just with all of his customer service and asset he has been to everyone. So if you're looking for a loan right now in a kind of ever-changing world of what places, as I am here shortly. Steve Carter is your answer. So give Steve Carter, email me first at dlock09@gmail.com. That's the best answer. And then I'll set you up with a VIP meeting with Steve Carter over at Intercap Lending and make sure that you get the full experience that you should, and Steve will blow you away. I promise you, we'll just continue to keep adding all of the great reviews that we always get from Steve Carter that makes it the best to be a part of Locked On. Thank you very much to Steve for his great customer service and to Intercap Lending for what they do as a sponsor of the Locked On Jazz. I want to take a little note. Local Utah girl, Elizabeth Bocock, just finished 5th today in the women's giant slalom at the Junior World Ski Championships in France. Let's give a shout out to her. Her brother Scotty's a big Jazz fan. Elizabeth and her sister Mary, both on the U.S. ski team. Elizabeth's just 18 years old. Might have just turned 19. I don't think so yet. Just 18 years old, one of the youngest members on the ski team. And so just finished 5th in the giant slalom at World Juniors. Remember that name for 2034, hopefully. So a little shout out to Elizabeth. Did Lauri get snubbed as an all-star reserve? So I think Lauri should have made the team instead of Paul George. Because Lauri's the best player on our team, and I'm not always totally sure that whether or not Paul George is the second or third best team on the Clippers right now, because I think James Harden is great. I think Domatas Sabonis got snubbed. 20 points, 13 rebounds, 8 assists a game, 62% shooting, 64% effective field goal percentage on a Sacramento team that is 27-19. So before I'm going to go pound the gun or bang the table on Lauri Markkanen getting snubbed, I actually am going to go with Domatas Sabonis getting snubbed more. They took Karl-Anthony Towns over Domatas Sabonis. And they took Paul George over Lauri Markkanen, and I disagree with both of them. I get Minnesota's 34-14 and probably thinks they deserve a second All-Star. I also would say that, I think Karl-Anthony Towns is the 4th most important player on that team. Probably a stretch, but I think Mike Conley's really important. I think Rudy Gobert is more important than Karl-Anthony Towns. I think Rudy Gobert leads to more wins for Minnesota than Karl-Anthony Towns does. I think Sacramento's 27-19. They're 4 games behind the Clippers, and Domatas Sabonis is their best player. And Paul George is really good, but Domatas Sabonis is better. And the Jazz are 24-26 now, which isn't great, but it's not terrible. And the fact of the matter is that at 24-26, Lauri Markkanen is unquestionably our best player without another player on the roster that is a top 20 player in the NBA. Or top 100 player in the NBA. So, to me, when I look at that's where I would have gone. But honestly, as a Jazz fan or an NBA fan, before I'm going to go go nuts and pump it saying we got wronged and Lauri Markkanen should be an all-star, which I think he should have been. I think Domatas Sabonis should have been an all-star first. I just think there were 2 snubs. Right? I think that if you want to look at it, the 2 guys that should have made it are Lauri and Sabonis. And Sabonis should have got in instead of Karl-Anthony Towns, and Lauri should have got in instead of Paul George. But again, I get it. They're rewarding records. And in the case of Paul George, I think they're rewarding legacy. He's a 9-time All-Star, and you got to bump him. He's having a year. His numbers are almost the exact same as Lauri's, but the numbers are all being done as the guy who's the second or third option. He's playing off both James Harden and he's playing off Kawhi Leonard. And to me, that makes life a little bit easier. All right, let's look at trade stuff. Interesting last night, by the way, the move the Rockets made. They traded for Steven Adams. We talked about that last night, that Memphis could trade him. They did exactly that. They traded Victor Oladipo. That was kind of an interesting little salary piece out there. I wonder if Victor could get moved again here before it's done. Let's look at Milwaukee, Minnesota, the Pelicans, and the Knicks here. So Milwaukee needs to do something. The question is with what? Pat Connaughton's $9 million is probably their piece. And then they have Marshawn Beauchamp at 2.6 and Robin Lopez at 2 and Cameron Payne at 2 and Malik Beasley, who's starting for them a great deal at 2. So they're going to have to piece contracts together. But I don't think they're trading Bobby Portis at 11.7. I don't think they're trading Lopez, Middleton, Lillard, or Antetokounmpo. So they're trying to piece together Pat Connaughton at 9.4 and a few $2 million to get up to 11, 12, $13 million of being able to trade for a $13 million player. They don't have a lot of draft assets left. They used a lot of them in the Drew Holiday and a lot of them in the Dame Lillard trade, so they're very limited in that. They're $18 million into the luxury cap right now, so they probably don't want to bring in a lot of contracts. They're very hamstrung. Their pick swap this year, their pick in 2025 goes to the Knicks. Their pick in 2026 is pick swap to the Pelicans. They have their 2027 picks goes to New Orleans. Their pick swap in 2028 goes to the Pelicans, and they're in a pick swap in 2029 goes to Portland. Like, they don't have draft capital, and they don't have any trade exceptions to trade into. So it's really, that's their only choice, is trading Pat Connaughton for something they think makes it better. Minnesota has Gobert, Towns, Conley, Edwards. But they get interesting because they have a salary problem next year. And so a little bit of the question is whether they try to address this at any point here. And their GM's creative and good. So Karl Anthony Towns is at 49 next year. Rudy's at 43 next year. Ant's at 35 next year. And Jaden McDaniels is at 22 next year. Like, that's too much. Mike Conley is at I don't think they would trade Mike Conley, but Mike Conley's at $24 million this year and an unrestricted free agent who they may have a very hard time signing in the offseason. Naz Reid, who's been wildly valuable to them, is only 24 years old and probably is key, is $13 million and $15 million. Kyle Anderson's at $9 million. He's the glue to the team, but you might move him. Nikhil's been great. Shake Milton at $5 million. Nikhil at 4 and Troy Brown at 4. Like, it'd be interesting to see if they couple those together. The wild card here is somebody go after Karl Anthony Towns now. But I can't imagine the number one seed with Towns being off an all-star year. They suddenly named all-star where they would suddenly make that move. But that's the move. Pelicans are interesting also of where they're going to come from. Because CJ's got 33, Zion's got 36, Ingram's got 36. They're pretty hamstrung. Herb Jones is at 12. That's, and under a 4-year contract, that's a tradable piece. And Larry Nance Jr. is at $11 million. That's a tradable piece. And Dyson Daniels is at 6. They could piece together some interesting things. Valanciunas is a free agent at the end of the year at 15. If they're trying to make a move ahead of the time, if they want to try to re-sign him, it probably will cost them more than 15. So the Pels are really interesting because they're close, but not quite there, right? They're currently sitting at 7th at 27 and 21 with signs of being great, but just not being quite good enough. And they've got Ingram for 1 more year before he's an unrestricted free agent. They got CJ McCollum for 2 years, Zion for 4 more, Herb Jones signed for 3 more after this week. Herb Jones is long and interesting. It'd be interesting to see what they would be willing to do with that. They also have The Pelicans also have some nice draft capital because we just talked about all those pick swaps from Milwaukee. So they have the Lakers pick this year with the right to defer it to 2025. They have the Bucks pick swap, and they have this year. They have the Lakers pick next year. If the Lakers convey pick to New Orleans in 2024, New Orleans pick if New Orleans defers Lakers pick in 2025. So they have the Lakers pick if they want it. They have the Knicks pick. They have the Bucks pick protected, but it goes to the Knicks if it needs to, and then they have their own pick. So they have pick swaps or a pick in every single draft coming up here for a while. So New Orleans is super interesting. The Knicks have a lot of pieces to play with. Evan Fournier is the big one they have at $18 million. They're going to move Evan Fournier's contract for something. That's the one that's been talked about the most with the Jazz. It's a club option 19 for next year. No one's picking it up. And then they have a bunch. Quentin Grimes is a decent player at $2 million this year and $4 million next year that they could add into it. And they have a bunch of $2 million pieces they could add. And they're also the hottest team in the NBA right now. So they really are looking for one more piece. Julius Randle out for a little while. And then the Knicks have a lot of draft capital. The Knicks are an interesting one. They have access to 4 different first-round picks this year, depending, all protected differently. 5 in 2025, 3 in 2026, 2 in 2027. So those are teams that are going to be really active and involved. If you want to start playing around with the trade deadline, those are the teams to be active and involved with. Both Jordan and Kelly have been mentioned a lot around New York. I don't know if there's any validity to it. And then the Thunder. And the Thunder are another one that's going to be wildly active here. So these are the teams, like we've talked so many about teams that aren't going to be active. These are the teams that are going to be active. Josh Giddey's been bounced around a lot. Don't know if they'd actually do that now. At some point, they'll probably have to. Davis Bertans is their big contract to move at $17 million, early termination clause for next year. He probably holds it at $16 million, and they have a bunch of draft capital, obviously, that they can move. So those are the teams that are going to be the most involved. That is Locked On Jazz today. Thanks so much for tuning in. We send you now to the first ever 24/7 sports channel Sunday. Utah Jazz, Damian Lillard. Tickets are available at utahjazz.com. Make sure you join us. It'll be fun to have you there on Sunday. Jazz and the Bucks, Dame Lillard coming back to town. It is now time to send you the first ever 24/7 national sports channel, Locked On Sports Today. It's also available on Amazon Fire TV.